Well, good afternoon. We have Vernon here today, and Vernon and I have known each other for 70 years, so we go back a ways. At one time, we were 1/3 of the Nooksack grade school basketball team. And we had nice uniforms. We had bib overalls and plaid shirts and stocking feet. That was our team.
Yep.
And Vernon's family came here about the same time mine did, the early 1880s. And they settled up near the high school and down. He's also tied in with 4 other homesteading families, the Walmers and the McCombs up in the Damtown area, which is north of where Liberty is now, the Liberty School was. And then the Steeles, one of his aunts was Steele, which is in the lynching of Sam Louis. He was the one that was sworn in as the deputy to make sure that Louis Sam was held in proper fashion. And that was one of his roles. And then he had another great aunt that was born down in Licking. And I know Marv knows where Licking is. And so he ties into a lot of older families around here too. Now, he's going to go back and tell you all about his family, so I'm going to let him get started.
Oh. Okay, can you hear me in the back there? Oh, good. You got better ears than I do. Thanks for coming, and I see several people here that are as old or older than I am. My sister Clara is here, and she's 90, I guess, 91, something like that. I wasn't around when she was born. And, I want to talk about just about everything you can think of around the area. I'm not going to stick to any one subject, and any questions come up, if I can't answer it, why Jim can, or my sister Shirley can. So we'll start in by, I don't know what you want to talk about. Let's talk about...
Who was your great-grandfather that homesteaded?
Well, my grandparents were pretty much all born in Germany, as far as we know, and we, like Jim said, we come here in my grandparents come here in the 1880s, early 80s, and so my dad was born in Damtown, which is halfway to Sumas from here, in 1892, and my mother come here in 1910 about, and she was about 8 years old. 7 years old. So we've been here in a long time. And I and several of my siblings were born on the Leibrant Road, which is off of South Pass Road. And my father and mother bought 40 acres there in the early 30s, maybe even in the 20s, I'm not sure. But in 1931, their house caught fire and burnt flat to the ground, and so my dad built another house out of railroad ties that wouldn't sell. They were poor quality railroad ties, and he built that house in log fashion, and it's still standing over there on the good Leibrant Road.
He also had the ability to make running water, which most people didn't have.
Yeah, he did, yeah. And he took some of the soil, he was telling us later on, that he put in that area, and he put it on the top of the stove, real thin layer of it, and let it get real hot. He said he could put his hand right on it, and I think it was probably asbestos or something at the time. But anyway, just a funny little story about what he was doing. He experimented with a lot of different things. And then later on, we moved up onto what is now the Leibrant Road, which they named it after the Kalises and the Leibrantses. And my parents bought 400 acres with another family, the Kalises. And there was 3 brothers in the Kalises. One of them was in high school, and the next older one had one arm. He lost the arm in a car wreck, and the third brother was blind. And they figured that the blind man and the one-armed man could equal my father's work in the woods, taking out logs and cutting wood and whatnot. And that worked out for about 3 or 4 years, and my father said he couldn't couldn't do it anymore. It's too dangerous with a blind man in the woods, and because it was all crosscut work, and there wasn't any chainsaws or anything at the time. And
Tell about the truck driving.
oh yeah, and they haul logs on the truck, and the one-armed guy would steer the truck, and the blind guy would do the shifting. That's how they operated. So then they split the property in half, 200 each, and the Taylor's family got the 200 acres. They had 10 acres cleared in the barn and the house, and my parents got the other half because there was more timber still on it, and which wasn't worth very much money. They sold it. My dad sold a whole bunch of it for $2 a thousand for a stumpage. Old growth fir. And was practically give it away. Nowadays we'd be called give it away. So then he built a chicken house, and we lived in the chicken house for like 7 years before they finally got around to building a house, which he also built out of timbers or 6x6s that wouldn't sell, conky 6x6s, and built that in log fashion also, which I've torn down since.
When you lived in the kitchen at the chicken house, how did you sleep? Were you on a wood floor or an earth floor?
No, it was all wood floor.
Were you kids all in one bed, or?
No, there was a girls' room and a boys' room, and then the main room, and then my parents had their bedroom in the bathtub, and we didn't have a bathroom. We had a bathtub in their room, and then we had an outhouse, of course.
And they were builders with lots of wood, so they built furniture. So you say one bed, but probably not. They probably had lots and lots of built-in spaces.
I don't know, we didn't have, I can't remember anything about that, the beds or anything. That's been done a long time ago. And
Were the chickens living with you, Vernon?
no, they were outside. We had some mean roosters, but we always had a few chickens, and always had cows. We had 4 to 6 or 8 cows, and we'd milk them by hand. And during the war, there was a stretch of the World War II that we had a blackout in this area. I think all of western Washington had a blackout, where you can't have any lights in the afternoon. Just in the morning it was okay to have a little light, but they was real concerned with the Japanese invading us and bombing the areas where there was a lot of lights, and so we get up at like 3:30 or so in the morning and milk the cows and take the milk down to a quarter mile down the road, set on the milk stand, and go to school, and then get back home and get the cows milked and everything before it got dark in the middle of winter. So that's pretty early. And
How many kids in your family, Vernon?
there's I have 10 siblings. There's 11 of us. I was number 8, and I had plenty of people telling me what to do.
It's a lot of working people.
And I think when I started school, I was sort of a bully. In today's language, I was a bully because I had to defend myself. And it was 6 girls and 4 boys, or 5 boys. And we're all still living except 2. One of them got killed in a logging accident, and then I lost a sister recently. And well, pretty healthy.
Your mom cooked for 13 people every night?
Well, Mom and sisters. They did all the inside work, and the the men done most of all of the outside work, except for maybe the gardening. The women helped in that.
Tell about cottage cheese from back from Dairyville.
Oh, Dairyville, yeah, that's my wife Karen, and we used to milk cows, and we didn't have any cooler system. We had a little stream of water running over the milk cans, and to keep them cool, get them cool, and once in a while they'd sour, and send them to the Dairy Gold, and they'd bring them back, and they'd put some red food coloring in it so you wouldn't ship it the following day again. So And so we ate a lot of cottage cheese, the pink cottage cheese.
Well, you went to work right out of 8th grade.
Yeah, I went through the 8th grade and I realized that the teachers were asking me questions that they already knew the answers to, so I said, I'm out of here.
You ran your own sawmill then,
Yeah,
did you?
yeah. Then I went 8 years without missing a day of school, which everybody just went to school if they were sick or not at the time. If you stayed home, you had to work. So my dad had a sawmill and he moved it around a few times, but he sawed lumber and sold it locally and into the mill at what's Great Western now. It used to be Everson Hardwood. And, well, my dad worked out, I think, 3 days in his whole life, jobs away from home. The rest of the time he worked at home and took out a few logs and made a lot of stove wood. Shipped a lot of stove wood went into the Linden area, if I remember.
So Vernon, when you were a young guy, you had several nicknames. I remember.
Yeah, I had several nicknames.
One of them was Jumbo. Where'd that come from?
Well, so they say I weighed 10.5 pounds when I was born, and so I've gained a lot of weight over the years.
Yeah. Another one was Red. They called you Red.
Yeah, I was red, and then I washed the color all out of my hair. You know, it's just one thing after another.
It was bright red the way I remember.
It was.
And then there was another one named Homer. They called you Homer. Some people called you Homer.
They did, my brothers did. We used to sing like Homer and Jethro when we used to go partying and traveling around the car singing.
Oh.
That's where I got that name. I've been called a lot of things when I wasn't there.
How did this dairy process work? You milked the cows,
We milked the cows.
you had it in the dairy cans, and you took it down the road,
We took it down to the Goodwin Road.
and then Dairy Gold would come by with wagons and pick that up, or
That was a truck with a open
They had automobiles
flatbed.
then.
they had what?
Flatbed truck, and then
Yeah.
we had a milk stand. Everybody had their milk stand. And
Then they took it where to Linden, or
took it to Linden, and Dad had a share in Linden, and had several shares actually. Had a lot of shares, and at one time they come out and said you can only have one share, so he give them away or sold them or something. But never got anything out of the shares. But anyway, it didn't amount to
But then
nothing.
what did they do with the milk then? They processed it somehow. They pasteurized.
Yeah, they did. I don't think they were making dry milk at that time. I think they were just pasteurizing it and making butter.
But it didn't go to the Carnation condensery here?
No.
Okay,
Went to Linden.
went to Linden.
And,
Okay.
yeah, there used to be a Carnation.
Well, that,
Plant
before
right over
Dairy
there.
Gold was formed, it did go to the Carnation. But Carnation was a creamery. They didn't take milk, they only took cream.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
One of the stories that I wrote in the Glen Echo book about his mother remembered taking a 50-pound pail of butter once a week to either Everson or Sumas. She and her sister would walk to either Sumas or Everson with a 50-pound pail of butter because that's the only thing you could sell, or barter. We didn't. Most of it was barter, and that's what we did too. We made butter out of it, and they sold the milk or gave the milk to the pigs or the young stock. Milk had no value; just the cream had value.
Were you guys milking jerseys, or what were you milking?
Hmm?
Were you milking jerseys?
Nearly always Guernseys. We had Guernseys. Jerseys are too high strung.
Yeah, in the early days, they were mostly jerseys.
That's what it is.
Jerseys,
and
Guernseys.
or Guernseys. Guernseys are also high butter fat.
Yeah, there used to be over 600 farms in this county, and in 1980 I worked at the feed mill in Lawrence for a couple of years, and there was 188 farms then in the county, and now I think there's 26. But there's the same amount of cows almost now as there was then. That's what's amazing. Another big difference is the houses. Every house had 6 or 10 kids in years ago. Now there's 1 or 2, and houses are bigger and the families are smaller. You know,
So were the roads paved at that point? I mean,
No, the roads were, all the county roads were gravel. And the speed limit during the war was 35 everywhere in the state. That was the state law, was 35. But there was no cops, so.
But if you went more than 35, you shook the car apart.
Yeah, right.
Because they were washboardy.
Washboard, no kidding, because they
County
raised them.
graded it once or twice a year. In between, it got to be a washboard.
Yeah, our older sister bouncing along in the washboard and ended up running into the neighbor's mailbox and the milk stand, smashed them down.
They butter on the way.
That's why we called Lawrence pavement,
Yeah.
because it was the only paved road in this part of the county.
Breckenridge Road, you know, when it was gravel, it always froze in the winter, and then when the thaw went out, we used to have winters here, and the thaw would go out, it'd turn into mud. And I remember one time we was going up the Breckenridge Road there, just about almost to Sorensen Road, and the bus driver stopped, and he got up and he turned around at us and he said, "You kids, hang on, I'm going to try to make it through this mud hole." He got in that bus and romped it on. His name was Roe, so we called him Roe rowed the boat.
Vernon, you said we used to have winters. What do you mean?
Well, it used to, you know, there was nothing to have, 30-foot drifts and run. Basically, Sumas was out in the, yeah. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. There's a lot of years they did have 20 and 30-foot drifts.
Vernon, do you remember the presence of the Nooksack people at all?
Which ones?
The Nooksack people, Indian Antone.
No, I never knew them. No. The only Indians, if I knew, there was one boy that from Strandell area that came to school, and that's the only dark-skinned person that I knew until I was probably 14 years old before I even seen a person of color. It just wasn't here. And
So no camps, no residences, nothing that you remember?
no, not that I remember.
Where did I hear about you riding motorcycles through the game?
Well, I used to ride motorcycles. There wasn't those.
At Glen Echo.
Oh yeah, there used to be a gym sort of a place and behind the gym, Glen Echo School there, and we used to ride motorcycles in there. It was kind of noisy, but
Indoors?
yeah, indoors.
Oh.
We rode motorcycles everywhere. My brother and I. And I raced motorcycles for years. I took 8th place in the Pacific Northwest in point standings one year, and the next year I was running in 2nd place in the Pacific Northwest, and then I got drafted in the Army, and that's another old story there.
Yeah.
I spent 2 years in the Army, and what a boring thing that was. I gained 35 pounds in 8 weeks in basic training. There was nothing to do. Walk around and act like you're somebody.
And then you were an experiment.
Yeah, she brought up I did an experiment. I volunteered for medical research. I was stationed in Fort Riley, Kansas, and that was a boring place. And I was, after racing motorcycles and working and doing things all the time, and then get in the Army, what a joke. And so this deal come up, you can volunteer for medical research, and I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun. And I was pretty naive. I had never taken a pill in my life, and I'd never been to a doctor that I can remember. And I wasn't even a doctor there when I was born. And so I volunteered with a friend of mine. He wanted to go to New York to go home for the weekends, and so we went to Baltimore and to the Army Chemical Center for a month. Volunteered for that, and I took different drugs as experimental drugs, and I knew nothing about any of them. And I was in a gas chamber 3 times testing out new riot gases. And this is funnier than it was serious, and I was so naive about the drug world. And then I took some other drugs that that I passed out in, you know, with usually take 6 or 8 people, guys, and take the drugs at the same time, and just one after another hit the floor, and I finally passed out. And then later on, they told us that there was 8 of us that took it, and the next day they told us only 7 of us took it, and the other one passed out by just looking at the rest of them. I don't know for sure. And then I took this other drug they call LSD, which, you know, I knew nothing about anything. I didn't know what the marijuana word meant till I was out of the Army. And so I took that, and I started reading joke books. They had everything for us, you know, always had pie and ice cream and joke books and stuff, that's something to do. And I was reading these joke books, and I'd read it, and see, that doesn't mean much. The picture didn't mean anything. I read the caption, and I couldn't make the connection. You know, and I started laughing about that, and I laughed for about 7 or 8 hours straight, nonstop. I had no control. And they would come by and they'd say, "Well, you think you could fight in the war like that?" And I would just laugh at them. So that went on for after that, and then after I finally, they had 2 great big guys with each one of us that took it, because there's one group a month before us that took it, and they got violent and tore up the rooms and stuff, and went down the hallways with their beds on wheels and stuff like that. So when we took it, we had 2 big guards for each one of us, in case we got out of hand or something. So, and then after about 8 hours they left, and I never slept a wink for 3 days. I thought I was in the nut house. But it was really a great experience after it's over with. And for about 6 months after that, I just tried to tell the story or just think about it, and I'd break into this laugh. I couldn't control it. It was nuts. So, but it was, thinking back on it, it was a great experience, but it was pretty stupid of me to do it. So that was my Army life. And so then we went, Buddy and I was in Maryland, and we had to go back to Kansas, and we had airplane tickets, and the airplanes were pilots or somebody was on strike, and so we hitchhiked back, and we hitchhiked we had orders for 30 days or so, it said 30 days or so. So we took several days going back, and I remember one time got picked up with this guy, and he was drunk, and I says, "How about if I drive?" And he said, "Sure." And he got in the back, and we drove for, I don't know, 300 or 400 miles, and thought, well, he's going to wake up pretty soon. Then we got out of his car and went on. But, yeah, so I've hitchhiked to Kansas, and then later on I hitchhiked from Kansas to 3 rides I was in Tacoma from Kansas.
Wow.
So I've really done well hitchhiking at that time. I wouldn't try it nowadays, but get back to the motorcycles. It's like in Everson, there's one policeman, Don Porter, and he drove a gravel truck. Now what have they got? 6 or 7 policemen. But anyway, if you knew where Don Porter was, you could do anything you want anywhere else. Pardon?
What did you want to do?
I just did whatever I wanted to do. I drove.
Drive fast.
So you're saying a gravel truck was the cop car?
That was it. Gravel truck was a cop car. Jim probably knows that. Yeah. Of course, he never did anything bad, so.
I remember racing you on the Mount Baker Highway.
Well, I've done that. I didn't even know he was doing it.
My car would only go 97, and you got past me like I was standing still.
Yeah. There's only about one corner I couldn't go 100 miles an hour on.
I think you said that you passed me at 120.
Yeah, probably.
When they built the Mount Baker Highway, we thought they had just improved a racetrack for us. Because we used to have the old road that went down around the other way, the old Mount Baker Highway, and so now they put this nice straight road in.
Yeah.
Are you talking into Bellingham, or are you talking about going the other way? Up?
From Newton's Corner out to Deming.
Oh, okay.
Man, that was a real racetrack. That was the first one that was paved. That was in
Yep.
50?
Yeah, there's only one corner that, right there by Gundy's, the only one I couldn't make it at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, there weren't that many cars either.
No, not many
Before.
cars.
Yeah.
There was only one state patrolman, as far as I know, in the county, and Fred Shank. Everybody knew him. And he,
As long as you knew where he was, you were okay.
yeah, well, he chased me home one time, and he come in there, and I was in the garage sitting there, and he come in, and he says, "Well, I got you this time," and I says, "I guess he did." And he went in there and felt the motorcycle, and it was warm, and he felt another, and it was warm, and he felt the third, and they're all the same color. My brother and I, we had 4 motorcycles all the same color, and he says, "Well, I don't know which one of you it was," so he left. I'll probably get arrested before I get out of here.
When did you decide to go into woodworking?
Well, I started woodworking when we got electricity, actually. And the family gave my dad his Rod Steele had some woodworking equipment, and he gave my dad a little lathe and a table saw. And I started working on the lathe, and I was out of school and had plenty of spare time because Dad didn't work in the rain, real bad weather, because he was older. And so I got into production. I made 100 sets of salt and pepper shakers to start with, and then I made a lot of different things, and with no training at all. And I was probably turned on a wood lathe for close to 20 years before I even saw another wood turner. And so I have a lot of different methods of doing that kind of work. Then I always wanted a big lathe, and I can remember going to Bellingham, which I think I went to Bellingham twice before I was 15 years old. That's just with my dad. He would need some mill parts or something. But this one time I went in there, and there was a second-hand store there, and they had some pieces for a wood lathe that had a wood frame to it, and the wood wasn't there, but I knew that the rest of it was there, and I wanted that thing in the worst way, but I didn't have any way to hook it up to a motor, because we didn't have a motor or anything. Anyway, that was that story. And so I always wanted to build a big lathe, so I did, and I built a big lathe, and now I have one that I've turned several thousand bowls on, and started out, I turned one maple burl bowl about so big and had it in the museum, and a lady from Seattle has a gallery there, and she wanted to put it in the gallery, and she put it in the gallery and sold it the very next day. So I thought, well, that was pretty easy money, and so I just started making more and more, and now I've been turning out 300 bowls a year for pretty much 300 a year for many years. And my wife Karen, she's a sales lady for me and does all the computer work and all the hard stuff. I do the fun stuff. And we go to shows all over the country selling bowls and sell off of the internet. It's hard to get retired. I've kind of flunked retirement, so I'm in bad shape that way.
How hard is it to get the material for the bowls? Is that easy?
It's not hard at all. In fact, I have enough material right now to make 300 bowls, and it just keeps coming. And, but a lot of people know that I do this, and because we have the studio tour in October, and we've done that for 15 years, and we have as many as 400 people come out to our place just to watch me turn bowls and buy a couple. And, yeah, it's been a fun job.
They
Yes.
were beautiful bowls. I remember one of your bowls was in my daughter's house in Indiana, so it traveled very close. That was years and years ago.
Oh, yeah.
They were beautiful, yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of people who like them. They're just bowls to me. But we had 2 bowl shows in Japan in the early 90s. We went to Japan on a exchange, well, not an exchange. The Japanese government puts on each year they have a different country come and put on whatever they want them to do, and they wanted some American dancing in Japan for this one year, and there's not very many American dances. There's square dancing, contra dancing, and tap dancing, and that's unless you get into the new modern dancing, that's about it. The rest of these, all the other dancing is European. The waltzes and all that kind of stuff is all European or Spanish, you know. So we got to go. There was 18 of us went over there, and the Japanese government paid for our trip over there, and there was 3 of us artists, myself and 2 Native Americans. One lady made baskets, and another fellow made totem poles, and we had shows in Japan, in Bellingham sister city, and then we went to Tateyama, which is that's Bellingham sister city, and then we went to Chiba, which is the size of Seattle. And we had a show there, and danced in front of thousands of people. It was pretty exciting.
The best way to world peace.
Yeah, it was a fun trip. So,
What about your apples?
yeah, I had an apple farm, which I started in 1977, and I went to the agriculture people in Bellingham, talked to about it, and he says, do you see any apple tree orchards around? And I said, no. And he says, well, get a clue. And I had one tree on the farm, and I picked 7 boxes of apples. I was like, boy, if I had 1,000 trees, I'd be rich. Well, it didn't happen quite that way, but we did okay. Yeah, it was a fun time.
Well, I used to buy apples from you all the time.
Yeah,
And
we
I
had
really liked your apple cider, apple juice.
Yeah, the last year I was in business, which has been 18 years ago, but I made 7,000 gallons of cider the last year I was there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very good business.
Sorry to see you fold up. And, because we missed that wonderful apple soup juice, and the apples were just great.
Well, thank you. There's still there's several farms around now. You know.
Yeah, Bellwood started with us.
Yeah, Bellwood Acres on Guide Meridian. The apple farm is. We considered buying my place at one time when I had it for sale. And then he decided he wanted more acreage, so he bought over by Meridian.
That's a beautiful place too. I love it.
Yeah.
Bellwood.
This is a book of Leibrant family. Goes back to 1540 or something like that, and it's got all of our family and the Leibrant family. And there's kind of 2 sides to the Leibrant family. There's my grandfather, and those 2 brothers and married 2 sisters, and one of each of those. One of the sisters got killed, and one of the brothers got, or sister.
I think this is making that buzz.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Sorry.
Okay.
Anyway, there was 2 sides. Of one of the sisters died when she had a child, I believe it was, and then the other couple, the brother got killed in an accident. So then the other 2 remarried, so they each had families, and so it makes a double cousins, and yeah, it's a.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's 2 parts of this whole Leibrant family and records. So.
Do you know the story about how your grandparents met?
No. I heard the story of my parents.
Oh, tell me that.
Yeah, well, Dad claims that my mother was leaning over the barbed wire fence, and so he drug her over. That's about all I know about it. Well, I know that other things happened after that. But
So you don't know what race you're from, a country?
they're all from Germany, as far as I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Were there a lot of you German kids?
There was a lot of Germans here, and then there was when I was a kid, there was a lot of well, I guess they're still here. Some of them Swedes and Norwegians, and working in the logging. Logging used to be really big here.
Germans were attracted by the free land.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons we came. We came in 1750, but to Pennsylvania. But the Germans like land, and that's why most of the farms in Linden are Dutch, because Germans were not as good at farmers as they were land. So they bought the land, then they sold it to the Dutch, and the Dutch have done the successful farming.
They knew how to deal with water too.
Hmm?
The Dutch knew how to deal with water.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. My experience back is that the Dutch were a little more frugal when it came to working on a farm. The Germans liked to hire people done. They cleared the land, like Vernon spoke, cleared the land. But once they got the land cleared, they kind of lost interest in it. My family is still on the same land, but most of them are gone.
Vernon, I'd like to hear about your dad, how many gallons of little tiny blackberries he used to pick every year and sell.
Oh, we used to pick a lot of the little blackberries, and I remember one time we picked enough and canned 100 quarts in one day. You know. Yeah, they used to be a lot more. I don't know why they aren't growing anymore.
And that was a stump land.
Yeah, it was all
They grew on stump land.
Yeah, the taxes were based on if you had cleared land or not, and everybody left one stump in the middle of their field, and to keep the taxes down. You had to have a stump per acre, some funny rule like that.
Some of them left the stumps in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And drove around them.
Yeah. And so then they changed that rulings to be taxed, so then everybody took that one stump out. It was a strange deal.
Do you have any idea how hard it is to take one of those big old stumps
A
out?
native berry.
A big old fir stump or a big old cedar stump?
Wow.
Cedars
There
were
used to be
pretty
a lot
shallow.
of them.
Yeah, not a lot of them now.
Up where we lived when we were kids, we were trying to clear land all the time, because that was, you needed the cleared land for cow pasture. And one time my dad had these mill up on South Pass Road, and they were gone all day, and this one thing, dry north winds was blowing. He always told us kids, if you want to burn stumps, go burn stumps. And so my little brother and I, we went out there and set a fire in the ferns right there where we live now, and with that northeaster blowing, and when my dad come home, there was about 10 acres on fire, and they fought fire all night. I hid under the bed, I think. But anyway,
Is that orange layer I dig through from time to time?
they burned off 20 acres, and
Yeah.
just what he had sort of planned to clear, and it did so much good that he never mentioned it to us. We're lucky there. Yeah, we was lucky it didn't burn more, but it stopped. They got it stopped. All the neighbors come up. Wasn't no fire department around that I knew of.
It's such hard work to clear land. How could they make any money out of it?
Well, we've done a lot of it. You get a sled and a horse and roll rocks on the sled and roll them over the bank.
It just looks like it's almost impossible though.
Oh, well, it's done.
Yeah, lots of land was cleared.
I've heard my dad talk about cutting old growth trees down, cutting them and try to fall them over top of a stump so they'd break up, so they'd burn better, get rid of them.
Wow. Oh,
And I sawed lumber for years and years. I sawed between 80 and 90 million board feet of lumber. And I've managed a lumber mill with hiring 8 and 10 guys all the time. It was a portable mill that we cut. At one time, we was cutting almost as much as Great Western was.
Well, trees back then were so huge.
Yeah, we never cut big timber with a mill, though, because it wouldn't handle big timber. But 3 foot.
Where was your mill located?
We cut up on Paradise Valley and
Oh.
Maple Falls area. And
And you're dimming?
And we have had it, we moved it, we'd have to have a big piece of timber to move it into, 'cause, you know, 1,000,000 board feet or more, just 3 months or so.
In the old days, they moved the mill, because they didn't have any way to get the lumber to the mill, so they moved the mill to the lumber. Then they'd log out, or get as much as they could around there, and then they'd move it to another patch.
Yeah.
It's easier to move the mill than it was to try and figure out how to get lumber down to
You still
to
had to
the
move
trees.
the cut timber, then how did you sell it? How did you?
Yeah, well, on a log truck, truck and trailer, you can haul maybe 6,000-7,000 board feet. When you haul on a lumber truck, you can haul 15,000, at least twice as much. So it was only half as much hauling to do.
Well, it sounds foolish when you say it, you know, move the lumber, the mill to the lumber.
Well, at that time, the slabs were worth nothing, you know, but now the slabs are valuable for pulp and stuff. But we just pushed all the slabs in a big pile and threw a batch in the fall, and it'd burn all winter. And sometimes we'd even have to go there in the spring and put the fire out. It was still burning. I mean, we'd have a pile of slabs as big as this building. You know.
What does moving a mill mean? I'm trying to imagine what things are on wheels.
Well, it wasn't on wheels, it was on big skids, and we had a machine that we could lift it up and back a truck under it and load it on, and took 3 big trucks to haul it all. It was, you know, the big mill and the motor and the edger and all the green chains and everything. We moved everything. Took about a week with 5 guys working to tear it down, move it, and set it up, and go again.
And skids are like big logs with,
Yeah, there's big,
Plain.
well, no, there's sod skids.
yeah, yeah, like for a donkey.
And
Yep.
you leave the skids behind?
No, we used the, you know, like 14 by 14 by 35 feet long skids. Runners, what do you want to call them?
How was that powered?
We had a 671 Jimmy power. It run a big generator and an air compressor, and then run the main mill direct.
The Vernon, are you talking about the 70s, about the 70s?
Yeah, in the 50s and 60s and 70s.
50s and 60s and 70s,
Mhm.
okay.
And up to 1980s, about the last time I worked in the mill.
Okay.
You got to be more of a problem with the environmentalists. You know, we had to separate the sawdust from the slabs and couldn't burn it and all that stuff. So it was kind of wasteful, but it, you know, it was real productive for the amount of people working we had.
Do you remember air being really smoky when you were a kid?
No.
I'm imagining all the burning later.
Well, there's a few shake mills of burning trash, but no, it wasn't smoky, you know, that I can remember.
And your home when you were a kid, I'm thinking of the chicken, that time when you were a kid, the chicken farm and then, the chicken shed, chicken house, and then the next house. Was that coal heated? How did you stay warm as a family?
Everything is wood heat. Wood
Of
heat.
course, wood.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. The old school we went to, the Nooksack, was coal heated.
Oh.
It had a big boiler in there and heated the school. And the gym didn't have any heat at all in it.
Just your motorcycles warm
The small grade schools had wood burning stoves.
But people were it seemed so happy, and they didn't all move away, they stayed here. What was it? Was it just the attitude of the community, or?
Well, a lot of people were not educated to go to city and get city jobs, so they stayed here. There's a lot of movement going on during the war, I'm sure, where they went and worked on military stuff. But
So what was your family's reason? Was free land and
well, they were loggers. And most of my family worked in the woods.
so it was a chance to make a good living then?
Yeah, make a living. I don't know how good it was. You know. We had jelly sandwiches for lunch. And You know, couple pancakes for breakfast and a couple jelly sandwiches for lunch.
But homemade jelly.
And my dad used to cut wood, and he'd split it all up to fit in the cook stove. And he'd trade wood in the grocery store here in Everson to buy us groceries or clothes or whatever we needed.
Oh,
Gosh.
So he worked hard all his life to feed us.
But you were happy.
Yes.
Well, we didn't know any better.
Is that the secret of happiness?
And you never fought.
Buy that.
Oh, no, never fought. Didn't have anything to fight over. First television I seen was 1950. And that was in Renton area. Wasn't any here. that I know of. Right?
Black and white and a lot of snow.
Yeah, black and white. Yeah. So I had some.
What was the population of Whatcom County then? I mean, compared with now? Now it's what, 230,000?
I think it was about 50,000,
Yeah,
25,000.
Pretty sparsely populated.
Yeah, my daughter wrote out some things to talk about, and he has one thing on here. It says, I guess I just covered that breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I didn't even know what the word dinner meant till I was 20. It was always supper.
Supper.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what would supper be?
Supper would be potatoes,
Oh.
mashed potatoes. We had boiled potatoes at lunch and boiled potatoes for supper.
And look how long you've lived. We're eating wrong.
Then we always had an acre or more of garden, and my dad talked about the potatoes. One year we had 60 sacks of potatoes, and well, there was probably 50-pound sacks. But anyway, that was enough for the last of the winter plus the few to plant next year. I don't remember ever eating any vegetables past August, September.
Canned.
Yeah.
We didn't raise it, we didn't eat it.
That's about right.
Couldn't afford to go to the store and buy it because we didn't have any money.
But
Well,
it
there was
wouldn't
a
have been as
stretch.
good food.
There was
Wouldn't it have been as good food as you produced
Yeah.
yourself?
there was a stretch where we had a locker in downtown Nooksack in the Cutthroat Harry store there. So that's the first freezer I ever heard of.
Yeah.
They had tricks, though, putting stuff in cold caves, closing the cave up, and it would
Excuse
stay
me?
really cold.
What were you saying? I didn't hear you that.
Well, I said they had tricks, to keep things really cold all winter long, and all summer, in the summer too. But caves that were cold, that were dug into the rocks, and the entrance locked up, and everything would stay pretty well. So
A root cellar.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we always had a root cellar.
the root
But
cellar.
beets,
Yeah.
carrots,
Yeah.
those things all keep a long time. Squash.
Around here you could just use a creek. Couldn't you put stuff in the creek
Yeah.
To keep it.
Some-
to keep it cold?
If you had a creek.
If you had a
Yeah.
creek close, yeah.
That was our cooler down on the farm, my grandpa's farm. He had a cooler and had a little house in the creek. They'd take the cans and set them in the creek. They'd stay cold.
I remember one winter the chicken stopped laying about in January or whatever it was. It was cold, and so we butchered all 20 chickens we had left there because they wouldn't laying anyway. And so they hung on the north side of the house and outside, and we ate fresh chicken for a month because it never did thaw out. That's the only time we had any meat, any stretch of fresh meat. Otherwise, it's all canned. Everything was
Just a
canned.
cold winter,
No deer?
wow.
No venison?
Oh yeah, we did venison, but it's nearly always canned.
Really?
Did you ever store carrots in a barrel of sand?
Well, I do nowadays, but I didn't used to.
Used to. I thought that was the biggest idea I ever heard.
We put apples and potatoes and carrots in the cellar, but we found out later that the apples will rot the carrots, and so
Oh, yeah. So you couldn't do it together?
No, couldn't do it together. Makes them bitter to start with, then they rot.
What a disappointment that would be.
Yeah.
Only take 1 year and you'd learn.
So is any other questions?
Yeah, Vernon, what were the schools like back then? Was it a one-room schoolhouse with all the grades together?
She asked what the schools were like. Well, I started in Hopewell, and there was 4 kids in my class, and I can still remember all their names. And in fact, Louis Millay was one of them, and I don't know. We walked to school. It was about 2 miles to school, and in the first and second grade, you know, you got out earlier, and I walked home myself 2 miles in the winter. And I don't remember it ever raining or snowing when I walked. I don't know. I guess we never paid any attention to that. But then they consolidated the schools in 42. 42 they consolidated the schools, and then we had to ride a bus to Nooksack. And we went to the old school in Nooksack, which is gone now. But then we spent 3 or 4 years there, and then we moved into the new school. We moved in the 6th grade. I believe it was in the 6th grade we moved into which is middle school now. And that was a brand new school. We moved in the middle of the year. And my older siblings were all went to school in Glen Echo, and we moved from one end of the property to the other end of the property, and then it was in the other district. So we went, and it used to be Deming district where we live now, but now it's in Nooksack district. You have a question in the back there?
Oh, you already answered it.
Oh. So Jim and I used to, I don't know, I don't think we was ever real close pals, but because I was a bully and he was, you know, he was too nice a guy for me.
We were friends, but we, you know,
yeah,
boys aren't pals like girls get to be. we were just all friends.
I ran into an old school teacher, Mrs. Quam, you remember her, a few years ago, and she's gone now. But anyway, I said, met her in a restaurant. I said, "You remember me?" And she said, "Oh yeah." She said, "I remember you." And I said, "Well, how come you remember me?" And she said, "Because she taught school for 35 years." And she said, "Well, of all the kids I ever taught, you were the smartest one in math I've ever seen. But did you ever learn how to read?" I said, "Oh yeah, I finally learned a little bit about it." I was dyslexic, and I didn't know what they called it at the time, but I couldn't read worth a darn because all the P's and Q's and B's were all backwards and upside down. I had a hard time reading.
But you can read now.
Oh yeah. Well, sometimes I can still catch myself with it. Can make some pretty funny words.
At least you know what it is now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading on one years ago, what, probably been 20 years ago. I had a piece of white paper I'd run along under the line. So I could read the line and move it down one. And it said, well, people that do that are dyslexic. So that's when I found out that I had a problem. So is there any answers out there? I got a question.
I'd like to hear about animals when you were a kid.
Well, we had cows. We heard the cougars in the hills, and once in a while, no, it wasn't.
We had cats to catch the mice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Always had a dog or two.
All animals are outside, none are in the house.
Horses?
Oh yeah, yeah. I drove horses. I drove horses a lot, dragging hogs out of the woods. And my older brothers, they thought it was too old-fashioned or something, but I enjoyed doing that.
Seems like you'd have to have a lot of cleared land to have food for them all winter. Was that a hard thing to have food enough for winters?
We made hay. Yeah, we never bought hay. We made enough for our own use.
Did your dad farm with horses, or did he get a tractor eventually?
We used to hire people to cut the hay down, then we'd do it all pretty much by hand. Pull it in the barn with a horse.
Was Ben an uncle?
Yeah, my Uncle Ben, he was a,
Because he logged on our place with a horse
oh yeah,
in the 50s.
uh-huh. Yeah, my Uncle Ben, he was quite a bit older than my dad, and he used to say, well, I'm 100 years old now, and no one had any records of knowing any different. How can you question it? Yeah, he was a character. He come down from Alaska with a Eskimo lady and lived with us, near us for a long time. They used to get drunk and she'd ride in the back of the pickup. She fell out on the Goodwin Road one time.
Some of the hazards.
Yeah, that's a hazard of bumpy roads. In the road we live on now, the Cabrant Road, it was just it had grass growing in the middle of it, and there's 2 little strips of gravel. I guess it was gravel. When I was in the Army, I was talking to a guy from Carolina, and I said, what's it like back there? And he got a lot of gravel roads, and he says, what's gravel? He didn't know what gravel was.
I think early on you said that you were about 15 before you'd been to Bellingham twice?
Yeah, we never went that far. We shopped in Everson, and there's 2 grocery stores down here. One of them Bachers and the other one Walkers.
That's a long walk to Bellingham,
Yeah. Oh,
Take
yeah.
the bus.
Yeah, my dad says it's a 2-day trip to walk to Bellingham. And
Wow.
he lived in Fairhaven for a while when he was in 2nd grade. He only went to the 2nd grade. 1st grade out here and 2nd grade in Bellingham.
But houses, when they built the houses, where did the lumber? Did they build the lumber on site, or did it come in from Fairhaven, or was it a little of both, or?
Well, they mostly didn't use much lumber till there was mills out in the county and in Sumas area. They used a lot of split cedar stuff real early, and there was mills.
Most of the earlier houses were log.
Yeah.
Almost all the earliest houses were logs.
Because my house, I'm trying to figure out, because my house was a kit. I think it was just shot for, I think it was before catalogs, but it was a kit. And it was the whole kit either came in on train or it came down the river. That's what I told them. It was just floated down the Nooksack to Sumas River. Or to the, do you know anything about that?
There used to be a lot of sawmills in the county. I can remember when there's probably 20 sawmills, bigger sawmills in this county. And it's down to 1 now. But actually, there's a few small people that have little mills on their own. But it's a thing of the past. Used to go down the Maubeuker Highway. They used probably 250 trucks a day hauling logs to Bellingham area. Pulp mills and the paper and the plywood mill. Used to go by the house. My dad owned the property, and they traveled through, and they give him $100 a year to travel through our property, and then we got 25 cents a truck for opening and closing the gate for them. So we did pretty well at that.
Oh.
So if someone needed emergency medical care, was there a hospital in the area, or?
Well, there was a hospital in Sumas, which my sister had some work done on her. Whatever, I don't remember.
I had my appendix taken out in Sumas.
Sumas.
They had 2 rooms upstairs from the doctor's office. Dr. Zarvis was his name. And I had my appendix taken out there. I was there for 10 days.
It was a long way to Sumas.
My dad drove me there. It was emergency surgery.
Yeah, I don't remember this.
Then they built the hospital out there where the county engineer shops are now. That was a hospital.
Yeah, that was a county hospital.
That was a county hospital. It was a poor farm to start with, and then it became a hospital.
Do you still sell those books?
Hmm?
Do you still sell your books?
I do have a couple left. Yeah.
That is a very interesting book that he puts out. Yeah, on the Glen Echo schools. It's got a lot of information about the Whatcom County in there.
Got a whole chapter on the Leibrants.
I went there to the Glen Echo school. There was 2 rooms, 1st through the 4th, and the 5th through the 8th. And there were sliding doors between that we would open up during the PTA meetings and the Christmas programs and this.
And it's still there.
Yeah, it's in beautiful condition.
And Vernon and Karen, you all, many of you know that Vernon and Karen and other friends here really have put their souls into keeping that school in shape and keeping it going.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't survive without Vernon.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, Karen, maybe.
yeah, it's been fun keeping that building going, and a lot of people use it nowadays, and we try to keep it available.
I wanna know what happened to the bell and how did it appear again?
Well, that's a whole story there. They had a big bell in there, and some high school kids stole it years and years ago, 30 years ago or so. And about 10 years ago, this lady called up and said, "I'll tell you where the bell is if you don't tell anybody where it's been all these years." And we said, "Sure, we'll take it back." So we took it back and put it back up there. We didn't know where it was. A lost bell.
That's a real piece of history.
Yeah.
That building, yeah.
Yes,
I
it
used
is.
to be in the Foothills Theater that used that for years too. And it is a wonderful history. I bet.
There's not too many of the schools that survived.
It's not too many of the what?
Too many of the schools that survived.
No.
The beach has turned the Liberty School into
Yes.
a residence.
Where is Liberty, Jim?
Hmm?
Where is Liberty?
You know where the downtown dance hall is?
That's it.
That was the gym.
Okay.
The building right south of it was the school.
Okay.
They took off the front porch and turned it into a house. I've appraised it, so I got to go up in the attic and see it really was a school. They
So we have a
didn't.
question back here.
Oh, no, I could add more to the Bell story if you wanted.
Oh, yeah, you know more about that than I do.
Well, not the naughty part. I know the happy ending. So at the same, well, yes, we got it back just like you said, but we didn't have the ability to get it back up into the bell tower. So, because it was a 400-pound bell, it was much bigger than the little tiny fill-in bell that we'd used for the 20 years the original bell was gone. So we got the original bell back, couldn't put it up there, we put it in Carmela's barn. So 2 years later, the new school was being built at Kendall. There's a feature story about it in the paper that said, "Oh yeah, you know, it'd be so fun if we could get the old school bell back and hang it, you know, at the entrance to the new school, the Kendall school." So their original school bell at Kendall was in the old Kendall school across the street, which is now the North Fork Library. It was over there. And when that school had been taken down, the little Kendall school bell had moved over to the teeny tiny little church that's there in the roundabout that they're building in the bend of the road of the highway at Kendall. Okay? So that's where the Deming bell was. And Glen Echo now has 2 bells. They have the replacement bell and they have the original bell. So we contacted Bellingham School District and said, "We've got a deal for you. If you can help us," Mount Baker, sorry. Well, the Mount Baker School District, the Kendall School. So if you could help us get our bell hung up there in the rafters, like, you know, with one of those big pieces of machinery, then we could do this shuffle. And we contacted the little church and they said, "Oh, we would just be happy to have a bell. As long as we could get a replacement bell, we would be happy to give the Kendall School their bell." So the old Glen Echo School, then Deming was so happy to get a bell and the original bell that they said, "Oh, we'll pick up all the bells and we'll sandblast them and paint them and fix them all up." So while that was happening, you and your good workers fixed the bell tower to be able to hold the old original bell, 400 pounds, right? Wasn't
Yeah.
it? It's like,
Something like
who
that.
could lift it? All those kids got it down, big story. But, in the middle of the night, but, so anyway,
You picked it up
they
yourself and
painted
took it
it,
up?
Oh, yeah,
and they
yeah, right.
came over one morning to put up the new bell in our bell tower. And, you know, we brought, like, we stopped at the bakery and got like a dozen rolls for the work crew, right? But all the former students from the Glen Echo came to celebrate the return of the bell, and there were like 40 people there. Do you remember?
Oh,
And it
yeah.
was just like fishes and loaves, you know, just like kept cutting the donuts in half and making more coffee, and it just like went on, and everybody stuck around to get that bell up there. Do you remember? You remember, you were there.
Oh,
You're in
yeah.
all the pictures
Yeah.
of Glen Echo.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. So anybody, that was a happy
Okay.
ending, and we got
I
bell.
bet you were there. Were you there also?
When they put the, no, I was there for the
Yeah.
celebration of the,
Anyway, so I could talk all day about my woodworking business, but I'm not only going to say it's up on Cabrant Road, and anytime anybody wants to come by and see what I do, and I'll demonstrate for you, and that's what I do, and I teach wood turning around the country. I've been all over the country teaching wood turning, and I'm going to Utah in June or May rather this year and teach wood turning, and they pay me pretty good money because I do it different than anybody else. And everybody else has learned from the books or from other wood turners, and I learn on my own. So I have different methods, and so I could teach all the time if I wanted to, but there's not a lot of money in that most times. But this particular job, they pay my way to Utah, I and Karen, and also pay for all my food and lodging, and give me $185 for an hour and 15 minutes of work. So, and I do 4 classes. So it's a pretty good deal for me this time. It's fun. Usually have about 120, 30 students per class.
You're doing such a creative thing that there's a
Yeah,
lot of
the wood turning has gone nuts the last 30 years, and there's a group in Mount Vernon. There's 150 members, and Seattle's got over 200 members, and Abbotsford's got 175 members, and Vancouver's got 200 or 300 members, and they're all wood turners. But as far as production, I'm the only big production in the country.
You
In
don't
this
see anybody
state, I
advertise.
should say.
And nobody's advertising any. You're not even.
Don't need to.
No, you don't need to. What?
Does anybody do it like you do, Vernon?
Some parts of it, yes.
But the wet wood?
Oh yeah, more and more. Yeah, I turn green wood and then
Well,
dry
I've
it
been up
after.
there several times and.
Oh yeah, and then
You
dry it
don't-
afterwards.
Oh, you do it. Dry it later?
Yeah. And we live in the area where trees grow, you know. One thing I've thought about mentioning is this area, they have put in this 5-acre minimum laws, which is most damaging thing that they have done around this county as far as I'm concerned. 'Cause they chopped a lot of farmland up into 5 acres, and it's not big enough to farm, and it's too big to mow for a yard, and the timberland too. People don't think about it that much, but boy, a lot of timberland went into 5-acre plots and just sitting there instead of being used properly for timber growth. But this is the best in the world. This is the best place to grow construction lumber. There's just no place like it. You know, where it's lots of rain and mild winters.
I'm one of those 5-acre and so I know what you mean, and I agree with you. Yeah, there's not much you can do with 5 acres
No.
unless you're going to have stock. Steers, you know, and meat.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely something had to be done, but that was not a good ruling in my opinion. But that's just fine.
I don't think so either. Being one of
So I think we're going to wind it up here unless somebody else has something.
Do you know much about Sumas?
Uh,
Like when was the rock, do you know when the rock road was paved?
yes. Oh no, when it's paved, no.
What, do you know the history of the rock road?
Well, I know where it is, that's about it.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
So, appreciate you all coming, and,
Well, thanks, Vernon.
thank Jim for helping out on here.